today's topic, we have requested you all to be here to enlighten us and the audience, and so that we can develop it into our policy recommendations also, that in the contestation, the global contestation, which is now focusing on Indo-Pacific or Asia-Pacific, what is the situation when we come to the geostrategy, geoeconomics, and also the technological advancement. With these brief remarks, I hand over you all back to Rashid.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ishfaq, Dr. Jahangir Jaspal, Ambassador Nagmana, Dr. Ali, and Defense Secretary Tachi Oman. A very warm welcome, sir. And the topic is, in fact, the contestations in the geopolitical, economic sphere, and the tech sphere, which are panning out in the region which we would like to call Asia-Pacific, and the world calls it Indo-Pacific. There's a lot that is happening since the end of Cold War, which ushered in an era of unipolarity that is now appearing to give way to a bipolarity and ultimately maybe a multipolarity. The once self-proclaimed superpower USA is having a sobering realization of the rise of a global challenger to its political, military, technological, and economic hegemony. Considering the threat profile that humanity is confronted with, the profligate waste of resources on non-productive activities is depriving the world of the much-needed funding to counter these common threats to humanity. The global community has understood the hollowness of the so-called rule-based order promoted by the West, which because of the politics of exclusion has alienated the rest of the world. The rules-based disorder that perpetuates the hegemony of the West and promotes the victor justice in Security Council is no longer the preferred social contract for the international community. Multipolarity, therefore, is emerging as one of the dominant credos of 21st century that is leading to minilateralism and multilateralism coexisting as a process that is ultimately leading towards a strengthened multilateralism, shaping a multipolar world. The world is moving away from bipolarity to multipolarity, and the consequent transition is full of headwinds. The problems like the lack of appreciation of the tectonic shift in geopolitics, the effort to stage a comeback by a global hegemon, and the embrace of multilateralism and geoeconomics by the rest of the international community. This is creating an environment in which we see the region that spans 3 continents, Africa, Asia, Europe, and this region which is called Indo-Pacific by United States and the West, and we would like to call Asia-Pacific. This is expected to contribute 50% by way of population, 50% by way of GDP at the global level. The contestations are a consequence of an enervating conflict, geopolitical conflict, competition that is panning out between the 2 global powers. One existing global power and the second, which is an emerging and classic Thucydides trap. The world is confronting with these issues. Now, amongst this, we view that 2 contending models are emerging. One is the model that is premised upon trade, connectivity, economic integration, and which is personified by alliances like RCEP, BRI, and other initiatives which are economics centered compared to the military centric alliances like Quad, Squad, and AUKUS. Now, this transition, I would not labor the point because this is informed audience, but it's worth recapping how it happened. When the Cold War ended in 1989, APEC alliance came into being. This is an alliance of 21 countries that included United States, China, Russia, and this was premised upon economic and trade integration. And it was a win-win formulation for the world. And one of the manifestations was during the last meeting between Xi Jinping and Biden in the United States on an APEC forum. Both they reiterated the need for burying the hatchet and moving on with trade, connectivity, and other initiatives. But the reality is different. The United States started pivoting towards the Pacific with a clear intention, knowing fully well that this century is the Asian century, and the world's economic center of gravity is moving towards East Asia. And from there onwards, pivot to Asia led to TPP, and which was accepted, adopted by Obama. But before it could be ratified, Obama administration gave way to Trump administration, and Trump came and took United States out of TPP. The rest of the countries of TPP were very keen, and they understood the value of that alliance. They renamed it CPTPP and continued, but that, because of the global patronage, could not make much progress. Another alliance, RCEP, that was led by China, was still making good progress. It is one of the alliances that I alluded to, which is economics centered. And from TTP onwards, once the Biden administration came, and even during the Trump administration, the United States started adopting a loose alliance of informal alliances. And that was a departure from the hub and spokes strategy. Traditionally, United States used to engage with the nations of ASEAN, East Asia, South Asia in a bilateral relationship, retaining itself as a hub and treating them as spokes. But now, since the nature of global economic and political center of gravity was moving from west to the east, so that morphed into a webbed alliance pattern. So this was interconnected alliance system of informal alliances. They started with Quad, that was a quadrilateral security dialogue. Now another such alliance has come into being, Squad, which includes Philippines and excludes India. Then there is a trilateral alliance, AUKUS, which is essentially military-centric, based upon submarine development and cooperation. There's Indo-Pacific Economic Framework of 14 nations, loosely bound based upon 3 pillars of technological cooperation, cooperation on lowering the tariffs and economics, and corruption and improvement of governance. So that's a complex skein of interconnected alliances, and United States is basically leveraging its position into in this Asia-Pacific region in order to gain economic clout as well as to contain China. And essentially, containment is the main credo, and that is the warp and woof of the whole Indo-Pacific strategy. And the manifestations we are seeing, these multilateral alliances like Quad, Squad, IPEF. IMEC is another variant which is going to Dubai, to Middle East, skirting Pakistan incidentally entirely. And rest, in the technological domain, there are now chip wars. There are alliances of countries, trilateral alliances, South Korea, Japan, and United States, Taiwan. So they are creating these CHIPS 4 alliance. So imagine we used to talk about geopolitical alliances, and now we're talking of technological alliances. They're fighting for the chips. The best chips, which are of high-end variety, are manufactured by Taiwan, TSMC, and then South Korea. The whole endeavor of United States is to prevent or delay the Chinese acquisition of that technology. So that is erecting barriers, and euphemisms are being coined like de-risking and decoupling, but things are not moving very well for United States because 50% of the global exports of semiconductor is still with the China. And we have some interesting figures. I'll just quote and then leave the podium for the esteemed guests. Out of the universities that are giving the best output in AI, only 10% is now coming from United States. 40% is coming AI critical research is emanating from China. So that edge that United States had is slowly giving way to Chinese ascendancy, and that is what is rankling with China and creating the kind of paranoia. From there emerges the great contestation. So having framed the issue, I would like, we would like to pick the brains of the esteemed participants of this dialogue who are much more knowledgeable and adept at articulating these matters. And we would like definitely to get clearer on where this whole contestation will lead the world and what are the inherent risks for a country like Pakistan into South Asia. So, sir, we would like to start with Dr. Jaspal because his topic is the regional security architecture of Indo-Pacific, which includes all these alliances and what kind of threats they pose. So over to you for your discourse.
Thank you very much, sir. How much time I have been allowed to speak? Thank you. Let me start by thanking President IPRI and his team for inviting me to speak on this very important issue. It's always a pleasure to be in IPRI because I started my career with the Institute of Strategic and spent a few months here also learning in the IPRI. So that's why there is a very strong connection with you.
We are proud of you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Having said this, I think Brigadier Saab already, you can say, set the frame of the security architecture. I will be just going to repeat these things. There are important things. If we start, I'm not going to the esteem or epistemologies of the Indo-Pacific because it has a different perspective. But there is a sense in it when the Americans used it in their strategic documents, especially in the National Security Strategy and 2009 Indo-Pacific Strategy of the DoD. Historically, in their Asia-Pacific strategy, South Asia was not part. But with this, they make it strategically a part of their military strategy. So that is the significance of Indo-Pacific. But when we look about the Asia-Pacific, normally we say 19th century was European century and 20th Americans and the 21st Asian century. And that has been endorsed by even the Americans and the Europeans, two factors which I like to highlight. One is that Asia pivot strategy, and from that, in a 1.5 decade, we find that the Americans have been following religiously to pursue that. Second is, in the European context, if you see the present situation, what we call it NATO's Asia foray. In that context, NATO has been starting looking all the minilateral strategic groups in Indo-Pacific or Asia-Pacific as an extension of NATO. So it raises three questions in our mind. What are the determinants of the Indo-Pacific regional security architecture. Second, how the regional security architecture is evolving and what are the trends and how they are affecting us. What are our concerns? In this, when we look about this Asia Pacific, United States have been systematically expanded their United hub and spoke systems into minilateral spokes, what we call it from bilateral treaty defense agreements to the quadrilateral like Quad. They talk about the AUKUS, and in the AUKUS, they also refer to the AUKUS Plus, and the Indians are struggling to be part of AUKUS Plus. So that is the concern in this. The third, another point in this context is on the geostrategic chessboard, where the Americans start containing China. There we also find some kind of a Sino-centric restructuring of the region. And this restructuring is very much with the President Xi's assertiveness. What he said, by Asians, for Asians. And his assertiveness policy, we find that in 2013, when they launched the BRI in Central Asia, in the following 2 years, they came up the white paper. In the white paper was by the Chinese, what we call it, white paper of the China's military strategy. And in that, they talk about or they spell out their active defense in the four specific domains. One is oceans, outer space, cyberspace, and nuclear force. If we can, if we critically examine, the Chinese have been investing a lot in these areas in the military domain. For instance, if I can start with the oceans, Blue Water Navy, and of course, Malacca Strait Dalima is very much in their mind. But besides that, when you look about the outer space, you have a number of the things. Same is in the technological or emerging technological domains, cyberspace, and the nuclear forces. Here, how the Americans are looking, the Chinese, that they say that they have built a 3,000 miles underground China wall. Basically, it's interconnected tunnels for deployment of the missiles. So that is the space. China retreat is what we call it Asia Pacific policy. It's very interesting when we see President Xi's policies. We find on the one side, we see his security initiative, which is very much based on the Global Security Initiative on the United Nations Charter. If you see the 6 characteristics of the Global Security Initiatives, you would find everything is reflection to the liberalist school of thought. But on the other side, he very categorically said that by 2049, China would be having a world-class armed forces. And recently, at the Shangri-La Dialogue on June 2nd, Chinese Defense Minister Dong Yun very categorically said, we do not allow hegemonism and power politics to harm the Asia-Pacific region. We do not allow geopolitical conflicts or cold and hot wars in the region, and we do not allow any country or force to create a war and chaos here. It's a very strong message of this month which the Chinese have brought it. I'm not going into the geoeconomics because a very senior scholar is here, but one thing which I wanted to highlight it, generally we misperceive geoeconomics as a neoliberalist kind of a model. I think it's a more reflection of a coerciveness because in the geoeconomics, sanctions or all these things when it comes. So today it reflects what we find it in the Russian scholars, Alexander Dugin pointed out that the Nazism was defeated by the communism and liberalism, and after that, when the communism was defeated by the liberalism has been transformed into the what we call a structural or industrial liberalism, and in that context, you can go for this fourth tradition he gave, but here, geoeconomics in that context. My third area in the in this construct is what we call it geotechnology. US adopted a denial, I can borrow a term from the economists, mercantilist approach towards the China in the technological domain. But for me, the disturbing variable here is in the security architecture is sharing emerging technologies with the allies. In January 2023, United States and India signed an agreement which they call it ICET, and India and they agreed that they will share technologies in artificial intelligence, cyber, autonomous, or etc., etc. Now, what is the outcome? How we look this structure, or when we spell out it's the parameters of this structure. I think that I have identified for 5 outcomes of it. In a philosophical construct, I can say Pax Americana versus Pax Salacia. In a more domain of the realist paradigm, I can say offensive cult is on move and the more dominance by the realists. That's the reason we find Asia-Pacific terminology has been now swapped with Indo-Pacific to strengthen this significance. Then outcome for us is of that is where you have a AUKUS, Quad, I2, U2, NATO, if NATO plus could be, then NATO plus, Indians tried, but then they distanced. Last year they distanced because in April 2023, when there was a approval by the Congress Committee on a Communist Party to include India in the NATO plus, India waited for 2 months, and in June, their foreign minister said that we are not prepared. At that time, it was understandable because within India, a left school of thought is very much assertive to sustain India's strategic autonomy, but let's see in the future how the things will be evolved in this context. But for us, 2 important things, which out of this I can brief it before concluding. My understanding is that one is Indo-US threshold alliance. That is the key. Though Indian says that we are comfortable with the Indo-US strategic partnership, but practically, when we talk about it has been transited from the partnership to the threshold alliance. The references are Quad. The reference is what you call it bilateral COMCASA, BICA, Lima. Even in 2016, when this logistical agreement was signed, that was the starting point. India is a major defense partner today of the US. All these things qualified, if I cannot say it's a strategic alliance, but at least threshold alliance. And second point for me is important, India as a net security provider. So quickly, what is my final saying it, that if India is a net security provider, it affects all the, I think, 30 plus littoral state of the Indian Ocean. But why it's a trouble for me only? The trouble for me as a Pakistani is that Pakistan is the only state in the Indian Ocean region which has a border conflict or a territorial dispute with India. And if anything which increases India's military capability, it always alarms me, or you can say intensify my security dilemma puzzle. So therefore, when I look about, I say, in conclusion, Quad boosts India's Act East policy and extended neighborhood policy, but at the same time, when I couple Quad with I2, U2, then it undermines my security. India's Indo-Pacific strategy, coupled with the US Indo-Pacific strategy under the umbrella of the Indo-US strategic alliance, or you can say threshold alliance, is detrimental for China as well as more for me, because China is a big power. Chinese are not looking India even a threat. That's why 130 billion legal trade is there. Chinese, if you see, they give even in their strategic document or discourse, they do not refer India. So Indians have maybe learned from that. They stop referring us, but still their 8 cores are on the deployments on our side. They fail to develop their integrated theoretical command system in this context. And finally, what is my conclusion here is that when I look about these kind of the things, how I can say the region, I mean Indo-Asia-Pacific region, remains a dynamic theater for world politics due to its geostrategic importance and geoeconomic significance. The region confronts economic, political upheavals, terrorism and separatist movements, as well as weak implementations of the policies. The United States encourages India and facilitates it to emerge as Indo-Pacific or what you call it net security provider. But India seems shy here. Why I'm saying seems shy here? If you see, there are two major developments in this context. One is, or I can say, two threshold nuclear flash mines in this region are, in addition to my other three. One is Korean Peninsula, second is Taiwan Strait, and then other three, of course, out of this region are, one is in Gaza after the Israeli overt threatening of the use of atomic devices, and then one is Europe and, of course, South Asia. But in this context, when we look finally, I can submit like this way. My saying is, please keep in mind the region's security architecture is very much in transformation. A, we know the way the Chinese are asserting. B, Putin and Kim shaked hand last week. That's a big shift. Though the third actor is missing, which was in 1953, China. But it's a silent, no limitless strategic partnership. And third, the smaller countries like Philippines. See the Marcos, what he made a speech in at Shangri-La dialogue, and he posed a challenge to the Chinese ships. So, and Chinese amended their laws that they are going to capture the ships. So, it's a boiling up. And finally, how the Modi is looking this thing. So, all these things collectively give us, as a literal state of the Indian Ocean, a big challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Very thought-provoking points, especially the connection between foundational agreements between India and United States, CONCASA, Limau, BICA, which directly threaten Pakistan, and its linkage with I2U2. So that way, it has its linkages with the Indo-Pacific strategy as well. We know that Quad already has a military component in the shape of annual exercise Malabar. So maritime security threat is a concrete threat, not something esoteric or amorphous. Now, they have lured Philippines and created Squad and a defense agreement with Philippines, which already exists, has been further upgraded. And that's, if you don't call it provocation, I don't know what other epithet we can give it. Sir, during your discourse, I thought we could allude to the famous 9-dash line, because the contestation essentially is in South China Sea and East Asia, where these 9-dash lines, which comprises essentially a line which is drawn marking the Chinese claims over the islands and the shoals and the reefs like Spratlys, Paracel, that needs to be elaborated a bit. In fact, after in the 50s, they started with the 11-dash line, the Chinese claims. Later, when the Vietnamese were won over by China, the 11 dash line was reduced to the 9 dash, and the Gulf of Tonkin was, considered safe from the point of view of Vietnam. Now, every other day we saw one Chinese vessel, Coast Guard, into a fracas, either with Philippines or even in case of Malaysia, there have been incidents. So we need to observe that thing very carefully, because once you militarize the oceans, any accident can occur. And once this AUKUS gets going and the Indian Ocean is further nuclearized, the portents are very rife with any kind of accident. So that needs to be, so 9 dot line needs to be viewed with a continual trepidation by all fire observers. So Dr. Jaspal has very ably highlighted the Western perspective and Indo-Pacific alliances, how they are shaping and what is the impact on the South Asian and Pakistan security. Now we would like to hear Ambassador Nagmana's version, which is, we expect that she'll give the Chinese version, because she's a China expert, having served there for long, and we would like to be educated as to what China is thinking.
First of all, thank you very much for bearing with me and inviting me yet again to one of your
We're honored to have you.
to a very good discussion with very eminent people around the table. As far as Chinese perspective is concerned, I feel that you have to understand where China is coming from in order to understand what their perspective is. Now, from a Middle Kingdom, it was actually reduced to an opium, state where their entire population was bereft of their intellect and whatever, followed by that 100 years of humiliation and then, decades of struggle to establish new China. So their perspective about the world is slightly different. And they have reason to have a slightly different perspective. I was reading somewhere a couple of days ago that this concept of Indo-Pacific was actually first time mentioned in history by, I think, a British scholar in 1783 or somewhere around there, but more as a geographical construct. And if we, people of our age, if we look back, we would remember that, when we were growing up in schools and colleges, this terminology was used to differentiate the Pacific from the Indian Ocean. So we would always say the Indo-Pacific. But then over the years, it sort of fizzled out till the Americans started to use it not as a geographical construct, but more as a security construct, particularly when they introduced the concept of India being the net security provider for the region. That has actually given rise to all the debate and the contestation and the fear that the final conflict, if ever it starts between the two big powers, which is US and China, may eventually play out either in the Himalayas or in the Indian Ocean. And that is where Pakistan becomes very relevant. That is where, strengthening of India becomes extremely important. Now, as far as China is concerned, its entire worldview is what I mean, we can only judge them from what they openly state. Because at the end of the day, each state has their own security and economic and political and strategic interests at heart. But for the moment, what we see coming out of China is a concept of not losing or winning. And which is very different from the Western concept, because in their concept, you either win or you lose. In the Chinese psychology and in the Chinese philosophy, it is not about winning and losing. It is about development and progress. That is why they say that each state has the right to achieve progress and development in order to ensure that their people are taken well care of. Secondly, they feel that a country like China, which is absolutely huge in terms of their population and huge in terms of area, and still developing. So they have a lot of internal dangers still to face, because the population has suffered for a very long time. They have made a lot of sacrifices to get to where they are. And their entire focus on the rejuvenation of the motherland, a dream that the Chinese leadership has promised to its people, for which they are waiting and sacrificing such a lot. If that is not achieved, then it would become an existential issue from within China for China. And that is why we have seen that they have really not involved themselves into any external conflicts in recent history. If you really go very far, then people say that they have never really gone beyond their borders to fight a war. They have always defended themselves. Even the Great Wall was a defensive structure and not an offensive structure. And that is why when you're driving towards the Great Wall from outside, then you don't see it. It's only when you're going away from the Great Wall that you see it, so that the Mongol hordes would not be able to see that there were forces there. So their posture has always been defensive. And sometimes small statements reveal a lot. When this AUKUS was established, and the Western powers introduced nuclear-powered submarines in Australia, the Australian Prime Minister had given a statement to which President Xi himself responded, saying that China has never fought a war on anybody else's shores. So we'll wait for you on our shores, which just meant that we will not start a confrontation, but if a confrontation is imposed on us, then please remember this is not the China of the Opium Wars or China of the Second World War, but this is a very, very different China, because they themselves have made this promise, not only to themselves, but to the people, that never again in history would they allow China to be humiliated the way it has been humiliated, and allow anybody to colonize it or have any other kind of controlling influence on China, be it military, be it cultural, be it political, or be it military. That is why they believe in what they call not losing and winning, but development and growth, and not confrontation, but friendly competition for the good of your own people. Recently, there was a statement in which they said something to the effect that this is a very small world, but it is big enough to contain many big powers. provided we cooperate and we take everybody along. That is why, from Chinese perspective, if you look at it from Chinese perspective, you see that they really have no military bases anywhere around the world except in Djibouti. They have, for BRI, they have this naval base in Djibouti, but nowhere else. Whereas the Western power, particularly the Americans, have surrounded China with military bases. In fact, Wang Yi, their foreign minister, was the one who I think showed this very interesting cartoon that had appeared in People's Daily, where they show a map of China, and all around it are American flags, indicating where the American bases are. And on it was written, look, China is so aggressive that it has placed its country so close to our bases. But it really meant a lot, saying, look, we are not aggressing. But if we are aggressed against, that we won't hold back. And this has been going on for a while, because their perspective is that unless you have stability, political stability, economic stability, then you cannot have security and development. And that is why they really put their head down since the opening up in the 70s and have reached where they have now reached. Now, the first white paper on the defense actually came in 2006, which was the second white paper on defense that actually completely laid down the strategy for decades to come, which is now being implemented. And that was, the key points of that were basically reducing the manpower, making it lean and mean and technologically advanced. So they started working on it, and now you see that they are making world-class jets. They are going into manufacturing of nuclear submarines and ships and frigates, and they knew that the time of maybe border fights and of nuclear weapons is gone, that nuclear weapons have served their purpose of deterrence so far, but things have now gone beyond. So it is more about defense than offense. And that is why you just now yourself mentioned that today the R&D budget of China is about 6 times more than that of the US. And while a lot of people think that China may be about 10 years ahead of the Americans as far as IT and 5G and other things are concerned, but realistically, the Chinese themselves, if you ask them seriously, they say that they have another 4 or 5 years to play catch up. But because they're not able, because they're financially going down, not able to invest the same kind of money and resources and manpower that we are doing in development research. By the time they catch up to AI, we would have gone many steps ahead. And that is why, when they landed on the moon, they landed on the dark side just to show them that we are a step ahead. And of course, because of the rare earths, which reports say that they got, goodness knows, 13 tons or whatever of it from there.
According to, you're right, China dominates rare earth
Right,
metals.
exactly. And that is, we don't really have time, but that is where the entire problem of the Indian Ocean comes in. Because Xinjiang is their largest province, and that is just next to us. It is 3 times bigger than Pakistan, and it is like Balochistan, very rugged, very difficult terrain, and very small population, but it has the largest amount of rare earths, gold, silver, and of course, their entire nuclear program, as we all know, is all basically in Xinjiang. And that is why this bringing up India as a counterweight to China, because if their western provinces are compromised, then Tibet is compromised. And if Tibet and Xinjiang is compromised, then China is completely compromised from the West. And that is what brings us in this confrontation as well. Because if Pakistan is not there, and if CPAC and Gwadar are not there, then China has no way of actually defending itself, overcoming the dilemma. Because you cannot come all across the Pacific to have a competition or a confrontation with the Americans led by the Indians, in the forefront. So that is why China has now shifted to naval development, and they have really, really developed their navy very fast. And that is why India is also now doubling the number of its major ports from 8 to 16, and the minor ports from 200 to 400. And that is why Pakistan has also woken up to the reality that we need to invest in our naval forces. Thus, the talk about these submarines from China, eight of them, 4 of them will be made here, 4 of them will be made in China, and the ships and the frigates that we're also getting from Turkey. And also we are also trying to pep up and that also brings that entire pressure on Gawada. So people around the world look at it, the Western powers, look at it less as an economic project, but unfortunately for us, more as a strategic project, or a stronghold from the Chinese military and navy to launch operations from there. That is why we saw a lot of problems when we are developing Urmara. And especially with the establishment of a cadet college there, if you read the Western narrative, it is against portraying that we are preparing our Balochistan sort of sea front to basically assist the Chinese to go to that extent. Now, this is all in anticipation that this conflict may come here. So far, if you see, then we see the irrational statements and irrational actions emanating mostly from the Western powers, like sending Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan, and sending their, or supporting their, interfering in their elections, this, that, and the other, whatever. But China has so far displayed their strategic patience to their best potential. And they're continuing to show that. Now, if you look at Philippines, we've talked about the South China Sea. If you talk about the Philippines and you look at China, there's no competition. So naturally, it is not Taiwan that is barking at China. It is, playing tricks because it has been empowered and ensured by the Western powers that they stand behind them. Taiwan is the same thing. So looking ahead, I don't think that for the foreseeable future, there would be a hot contestation or a hot war directly between the Americans and the Chinese. Because if you look at the last, particularly last 5 years, then things have reached to the brink many, many times. But they have returned almost from the point of no return. They have stepped back because each time the leadership meets, and other reason why I think that there is going to be a management of the relationship. The competition and that confrontational atmosphere is not about to go away anywhere soon. It will remain. But the American mindset has always been. Europeans are a little different, and that is what is now bothering the Americans a lot, because Europeans have now started talking about what De Gaulle used to say, that we need to have strategic independence, which of course the Europeans lost when they joined NATO and gave up their sovereignty on their defense and foreign policy. Now, if you give up your sovereignty in defense and foreign policy, what is left with you? Practically nothing. And that is what the Americans want India to become. That we, the states in the region actually accept India as a net security provider and give a part of our defense and foreign policy sovereignty to the sole security provider. That is why, right from the beginning, the government of Pakistan, Foreign Office have always said, we do not have a problem with Asia Pacific as a geographical construct, but we certainly do not accept it as a political, security, and strategic construct. That is where the difference lies. So far, as I said, for the foreseeable future, speaking to the Chinese also, you realize that they're really not in a mood for a fight, because it will derail them from achieving their second centennial goal in 2024. So they are going to be very focused. Americans at this moment are really, I don't think, in a position to really start a full-scale war, because they know this is not the China of 50 years ago. This is a different China. And the war is not going to be about military hardware anymore. It will be about AI and 5G and other things. So there is, if you read Chinese media and other Western medias, they are all talking about the next confrontation being a robotic war, and probably in the Himalayas, which means between the Indians and the Chinese, before they come to the naval conflict. This is just one of the things that you read about when you say, before they come to the Indo-Pacific or the Indian Ocean. But you cannot rule out a freak accident. You cannot rule out, I don't think Trump is going to be as a warmonger like Biden, because Biden has a military background. He's very macho that way. Trump is a businessman. Trump makes deals. So he says wars are not good, business is good. So maybe, and that is why you saw that when Trump was in power, the China-US confrontation was sort of not at the level that it has been with Biden in power. And now with the EU also having second thoughts after what has happened in Ukraine, things are becoming more difficult for the Americans. And the Americans also realize that this is not the 50s, where the Chinese and the Russians were at, daggers drawn, and they weren't really together. Right now, the Russians and the Chinese are on the same page with their, all-time strategic no-limit limit partnership. So if they two get together, and the way that India has behaved in the Ukraine war, they abstained. And they're still getting wheat from Ukraine and selling it back to the American partners in Europe. And they're still getting Ural oil and paying in yuan and other currencies to again refine it and sell it to Western Europe. So it has actually defied. And I also feel that Foreign Office used to say it for a very long time in our confidential reports. Now everybody knows about it, that the relationship between the US and the Indians will only go thus far and no further. Because Indian beings, Indians, will double play, and they're still playing on both sides of the road, and they're playing very well. But if there is a confrontation, the question is, will India side with, will India fight against the Russians? So if Russians and the Chinese are on one side, that is why you now see the Western powers, led by, of course, Canada, and then trying to sanction China in some, India in some ways. There are now messaging, which is very subtle at the moment, but it is coming. So you feel that, that threshold is coming. So I think a doomsday scenario in the Indian Ocean in the recent future does not look viable unless there is a, but that does not mean that we do not, as far as Pakistan is concerned, we do not sort of have complete clarity of where we need to stand when push comes to shove. And if things really become difficult, then we should know where our strategic compass should focus, what would be in our long-term interest. Are we going to still go and make decisions that are for short-term benefit that will ruin us completely if we do that this time? Because the finish line is not too far. It's only 24 years ahead. So we need to be, very, very clear at the political, bureaucratic, and military level. There has to be understanding on where we want to see ourselves in 2050. And if we don't do that now, we are going to be in a worse situation that we have been before by taking some, I won't say a wrong decision, but we had compulsions to take those decisions. Let's say which didn't turn out to be that good for us in the long term. But this time, we'll have to take a conscious decision in our national interest. Not in China's national interest, not in America's national interest, in our own national interest. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear in a while from Dr. Ishfaq as to what that vision should be, what you alluded to, what is in the best interest of Pakistan. But I'm not very sure whether this confrontational mode will go. The recent G7 meeting, which has concluded in Italy, there were 28 references to China in the communique, and all in
Negative terms. Yeah.
pejorative terms.
Yeah.
And
It's not going away. The confrontation is not going away, but it won't, what I'm saying, it won't cross that final line.
No, I'm saying something else.
Manage it.
Yeah. And if you see the annual threat assessment paper by the US intelligence community 2002-4, that clearly lays out there are two threats in this region: Taiwan Straits and India, Pakistan, and India, China. I don't know why they are framing it that way. Maybe there is a design. Bloc politics, they just don't want to let go of the bloc politics and keep the pot boiling. So this needs to be, I think, understood. Yeah, yeah.
पड़ोसी को भेज दें 2 हफ्ते बाद और वे घुटने टेके वो आ जाते हैं उनके मिनिस्टर्स वहाँ से अभी पड़ोसी के विजिट के बाद क्या हुआ था फॉरेन सेक्रेटरी ट्रेजरी वहाँ पहुँच गई और हाथ जोड़ के पाँव पकड़ के कहा कि नहीं हमारा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन चेंज होना पड़ेगा हमारा जो है वो लॉकडाउन हो जाएगा प्लीज़ हमें हमारे 8 ट्रिलियन के ट्रेजरी बॉन्ड्स खरीद लें वरना हम मर जाएं तो उन्होंने खरीद ली तो मैंने जो
I think आजकल के दौर में economics is blood and confrontation is water. So blood is thicker than water. 430 billion US dollars का trade है between Arab world and China. So that is why it gives China. तो China को इसीलिए clout है because it is brokering amity between Saudi Arabia and Iran because of this, so it lubricates. So, अभी जो I believe tech जो rivalry, I think that portion would be covered by Dr. Ishfaq. So, sir, over to you.
Not tech, economic. Tech,
No, I know, but would you like to cover, sir, or not? Yeah, ठीक है. Economics and other contestations into Indo-Pacific is your discourse. So over to you for your thoughts.
Much. Let me first thank Dr. Raza and his team for giving me this opportunity to speak on the subject, which is very, very important. Before I go to my presentation, I think Brigadier Rashid has already set the agenda, and he very ably, Dr. Jaspal, explained the security aspect. The Chinese view also is here. My job is to give you economics. But I was struck by one of your comments. Self-proclaimed superpower. You described the United States as self-proclaimed superpower. That was a very strong statement, but this is very close to my heart also. And I would request all those students who are sitting here just to examine this. This can be a very good topic of research. United States, a self-proclaimed superpower.
PhD करे जी.
और इसको किस एंगल से आप देखें? Has United States ever fought alone any war in the world and won?
It has never won anything, whether together or alone.
I have searched and I found the United States has never fought a single war alone. How can you describe a person? For example, if I say that Mr. So-and-so is a great economist, so if I say that Mr. So-and-so is a great economist, how would you describe that the person is a great economist? You will simply look at his resume and see how many articles or books that person has written and contributed in the field. So if there is a superpower, is a mighty military power, has this military power has fought any single battle, a single war? The answer is no, I don't find. Even to fight this Houthi militias, they had to bring together 22 countries together. So how can you describe this as a superpower or mighty military power? They have the ability to organize or bring people into their fold because of their coercive nature of power. And I think you have alluded President de Gaulle returning in Europe. This is exactly because that was the coercive power of the United States that brought all these Europeans together. Now they are realizing that they are facing difficulties, particularly their German economies, which is the largest economy in Europe, is under tremendous pressure. So the entire Europe is facing the same kind of problem. And then this is the realization that we need strategic independence also. So having said this, let me go back to ये एक research का topic है, आप लोग इसको ज़रूर examine कर लें. The second thing is about Indo-Pacific versus Asia-Pacific. मेरे नज़दीक it is just a name. The objective is the same, containment of China, whether it is through Indo-Pacific Alliance or Asia-Pacific Alliance. In the United Nations, it is Asia-Pacific. This region is described as Asia-Pacific. आपने देखा होगा कि UN SCAP जिसको हम कहते हैं, United Nations Economic Commission for Asia and the Pacific, not Indo-Pacific. The UN में भी इसको एशिया पैसिफिक इस रीजन को डिस्क्राइब करते हैं, नॉट इंडो पैसिफिक, बट नेम इज जस्ट a name. The objective and the mission is the same, how to contain China, basically. Now, having described this, let me go back and this is a very important topic because the world is changing very rapidly, very fast. And geopolitics is giving shape to geoeconomics. So what is geoeconomics? In a very plain language, this is the interplay of international economics and international relations. And the use of geoeconomics as the superpowers are basically using geoeconomics as an instrument to promote and defend their national interest and gain more and more space. तो इसके लिए बहुत सारे instruments भी हैं geoeconomics के, in which the most important instrument is the blatant use of economic and financial sanctions. And now, the blatant use of your own currency as a weapon of war, dollar. तो जब आप, when you use economic and financial sanction as a weapon of war against someone, तो naturally in the military context, आप देखेंगे कि your enemy is also, they also try to prepare and blunt your instrument. तो इसलिए आपने देखा होगा कि ये the new grouping is emerging to protect themselves from this economic sanctions. So we see the fragmentation in global economy, fragmentation in global trade, fragmentation in global finances is taking place because people are adjusting or preparing themselves to how to handle this economic sanctions. The other instrument is currency, dollar, as a weapon of war. So the other side, those who are effectees, they are coming up with their own way to settle their trade account, bypassing dollar, and that is why there is a wave of de-dollarization which is coming up. ये सारी चीजें जो हो रही हैं वो इसीलिए हो रही हैं. Then using international financial institution also as a weapon of war, and who else can know better than Pakistan? We are the victim of this international financial institution. आखिर में मेरा ख्याल है मैडम नवमाना ने, she alluded to this. Our foreign policy is now circling around how to get an IMF bailout package. That's it. This is our foreign policy. अमेरिका को नाराज ना करो, इधर ना करो, ये बातें ना करो, ताकि IMF से हमें bailout package मिल जाए. So look at this, that our foreign policy is now circled around how to get a bailout package. So we are the victim of this weapon of war. इसमें सिर्फ IMF World Bank ही नहीं है, इसमें FATF का भी हमने देखा कि how Pakistan was maligned and penalized in international forum. हम चूँकि बहुत ज़्यादा major trading partner नहीं है, तो WTO में भी we don't see any, we don't go to the WTO. अगर वहाँ जाएंगे तो पता चलेगा कि how step-by-step treatment we get. So these are the instruments which are taking place. दुनिया में, if you look at today's world, the structure of war, जिसे हम कहते हैं, is changing from military to economics. From military to economics. And let me give you an example. Sanctions are replacing military strikes. ज़रूरत नहीं है हमला करने की, sanction लगाओ. Similarly, currency war and trade war are more common than occupation of territories. बजाय कब्जा करने के आप ये काम कर लें. So these are the new instruments which is taking war taking place. इसलिए economics is now at the center stage of military conflict. एक ज़माने में there used to be a block politics, regional blocks बन रहे थे. जैसे आसियान बन गया एशिया पैसिफिक में in 1967. Then European Union was founded in 1951. फिर इसके बाद एशिया पैसिफिक इकोनॉमिक कोऑपरेशन आया, एपेक जिसको हम कहते हैं. It was established in 1989. फिर एक नाफ्टा बना, नॉर्थ अमेरिकन फ्री ट्रेड एरिया, in January 1994. उसको हमने रीनेम कर दिया डोनाल्ड ट्रंप साहब ने आने के बाद. उसको हम USMCA कहते हैं, यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स, मैक्सिको एंड कनाडा, एंड दैट इज विथ इफेक्ट फ्रॉम 2020. उसके बाद एक साउथ अमेरिका में था मर्कोसर, और हमारे रीजन में था सार्क. All these institutions have vanished except ASEAN and European Union. बाकी सब खत्म हो गए. Nobody knows about what happened to Mercosur. Nobody talks about NAFTA anymore. SAARC, and I was one of the founders of SAARC. ये भी आप लोगों को वैसे ही बता रहा हूँ. So nobody knows more SAARC than me. And in giving a lecture in NDU, National Defense University, in 2012, some 12 years ago, I said SAARC is finished. SAARC is finished. Because of two reasons. That India always considered SAARC as a smaller nation of South Asian countries are ganging up against India. So they were very, very skeptical from the very beginning. Secondly, the rivalry between two women in Bangladesh, Khalida Zia and the current Prime Minister, Hasina Wajid, इसने भी खत्म कर दिया SAARC को. Because Mr. Ziaur Rahman, General Ziaur Rahman, who was the president of Bangladesh in 1983-84, he proposed the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. So it was his brainchild. Naturally, when the second lady came, उन्होंने कहा कि ये सारे जो हैं जनरल ज़ियाउर रहमान ने काम किया, इसको सबको जीरो से मल्टीप्लाई करो. इवन बहुत सारे जो एयरपोर्ट के नाम थे वो बदल दिए गए, सड़कों के नाम बदल दिए गए. हर चीज़ जहाँ पे ज़िया आता था उसको ख़त्म कर दिया गया. तो SAARC भी उसी वजह से ख़त्म हो गया. एंड दैट ऑल्सो सूटेड इंडिया. उन्होंने कहा कि ठीक है. तो 2012 से SAARC भी ख़त्म हो गया. नाउ दिस इज ए, जिसको मैं कहता हूँ, these things were giving birth to geoeconomics at that time. Now this is an era of new geoeconomics. New. So what is new about this? The world is now divided into three blocks. Three blocks. ये कौन कह रहा है? The Deputy Managing Director of the IMF, Geeta Gopinath, giving a lecture at Harvard University only 2 months ago. She described that the world is now divided into three blocks. One is United States leaning bloc, the other is China leaning bloc, and the third is non-aligned leaning blocs. But the space of this non-aligned leading blocs is shrinking. Because the motto of international relations have changed. There is no concept of कि जी हम सारे सुपर पावर के साथ अच्छे ताल्लुक रखेंगे, नेबर के साथ अच्छे ताल्लुक रखेंगे, जो एक होता था हमारे इसका. Today, either you are with us or you are against us. So there is no middle ground. It is a zero-sum game. International relations has been converted into a zero-sum game. Either you are with us or you are against us. तो ये जो मिडिल जो नॉन अलाइंड ग्रुप है, दे आर श्रिंकिंग फास्ट. ये जो नॉन अलाइंड ग्रुप है, दे आर बेसिकली द ग्लोबल साउथ, इन विच वी ऑल्सो बिलोंग. ठीक है. नाउ यू सी द इमर्जेंस ऑफ न्यू geoeconomics, जिसमें the world, as you will see, there will be no G20. Mark my word, there will be no G20 in the next 4 or 5 years' time. There will be only two, G7 versus BRICS. ये मेरे अल्फाज को नोट कर ले. G7 versus BRICS. ब्रिक्स प्लस एक्सपेंशन होता रहेगा. और इसमें जो इंपॉर्टेंट रोल प्ले किया है, अनफॉर्चुनेटली दिस इज यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स. इट इज द यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स हु हैज क्रिएटेड दिस एनवायरनमेंट, जिसमें G20 भी खत्म हो जाएगा, क्योंकि G20 के जो मेंबर्स हैं, दे आर ऑल बिकमिंग पार्ट ऑफ ब्रिक्स एक्सपेंशन. सो व्हाट इज G20 देन? दे आर ऑल ब्रिक्स बेसिकली, एक्सक्लूडिंग G7. G20 में 7 तो वो मुल्क हैं ना G7 के, बाकी 13 रह गए. 13 इज ग्रेजुअली मूविंग टूवर्ड्स ब्रिक्स. तो वो खत्म हो जाएगा, फिर वो G7 वर्सेस ब्रिक्स रह जाएगा. ना इट हैज इट्स रूट, जिसको मैं समझता हूँ, द रूट्स ऑफ द न्यू जियो इकोनॉमिक्स बेसिकली डेट्स बैक टू the turn of 21st century. In other words, after the 9/11, United States became involved in Afghanistan. ठीक है, वहाँ से निकले Iraq, then Libya, then Syria, and so on. So 10 years of fighting war, uninterrupted war, gave the opportunity to China, because that was the peaceful environment China could get. And then China made inroads into Africa, Latin America, and Middle East. By 2010, 2011, United States realized that China has become a monster, economic monster, powerhouse. But it was too late by that time. तो ये पिवट एशिया पॉलिसी आई. हाउ टू कंटेन चाइना, बट इट वॉज टू लेट बाय दैट टाइम. सो in the growth and development and prosperity of China, it is the United States which played an important role. The Chinese should be grateful to the United States for providing uninterrupted over a decade peaceful environment for their progress. Then after 2011, 2012 and 2013, we see the emboldened China came up with Belt and Road Initiative. And today, 155 countries are the member of Belt and Road Initiative. That unnerved the United States. What is happening? तो जितनी नर्वसनेस बढ़ेगी उतनी एग्रेसिव एप्टीट्यूड उधर से दूसरी तरफ से हो रहा है. एंड यू आर विटनेसिंग द एग्रेसिवनेस ऑफ द यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स इन इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस. ये जो ये टर्म आया है कि आइदर यू आर विथ अस और अगेंस्ट अस, दिस इज बिकॉज ऑफ द फ्रस्ट्रेशन. देन 2014, द एनेक्सेशन ऑफ क्राइमिया. इस हिस्ट्री को समझने की कोशिश करें. Annexation of Crimea by Russia. इसने एक नया फ्रंट खोल दिया यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स के लिए. Now after 2014, it is not only the containment of China policy, it is double containment. Containment of China as well as the containment of Russia. मेरे ख्याल में दिस इज द ग्रेटेस्ट ब्लंडर ऑफ द वेस्टर्न फॉरेन पॉलिसी, दैट यू ब्रॉट टुगेदर टू वॉरिंग पावर इनटू ए नो लिमिट फ्रेंडशिप. it will be very difficult for the United States to fight two wars with two superpowers. रबी आपने जसपाल सिंह साहब ने जो कहा कि this is a major development which has taken place in North Korea, a visit of Putin and Vietnam also. This is a major development. इसके असरात आपको बाद में मिलेंगे. After 2014, ये चलता रहा सिलसिला, and then came 2022, the invasion, Russian invasion of Ukraine. And since then, this confrontation, the pace of confrontation has accelerated. Aggressive, unprecedented use of economic sanction. There are between 13,000 to 16,000 economic sanctions have been imposed in Russia. Never happened in the history of the mankind. कि किसी एक मुल्क पे इतने शॉर्ट पीरियड में इतने ज़्यादा सैंक्शन लगा दिए गए. क्या फ़र्क पड़ गया? Has Russian economy destroyed? The answer is no. Russia has now moving towards the same footstep as the United States. It has become a war economy. Russian economy is now a war economy. And its economic growth is more than what the United States' economic growth has been in 2023, according to the IMF statistics. So they are doing very fine. What happened to Iran? Some 44 years under economic sanction. What happened to Iran? Iran has become a power. क्या फर्क पड़ गया इस economic sanction का? Cuba has been under sanction. Venezuela has been under sanction. This shows the sanctions will not work in modern days. And that is why it is giving birth to alternative groupings. जिसको हम BRICS कह रहे हैं. These people are joining this grouping to protect themselves. Iran will be exporting their products to the BRICS nations. Venezuela will become a member of BRICS expansion. They will be having a market. So, ये जो था कि इनको isolate कर दो and the economy will crumble, it is not working. It is not working. Sanctions will not work. And particularly sanction in a country which is resource rich. आप imagine करें कि there is a country who is resource rich. The world is dependent on their resources, and if you impose economic sanction, you are not hurting them, but you are hurting the entire world who are dependent on those resources, particularly the energy, food, fertilizer from Russia. So the world has suffered because sanction, they have got the alternative market, they found the alternative market, but the world has suffered in terms of higher prices of food, higher prices of energy. हम जैसे मुल्क को उनको बहुत नुकसान हुआ. So we see that the global south, particularly in which we belong, हम एक तरफ जा रहे हैं. Gradually you will see that more and more countries are joining BRICS. पहले तो ब्राज़ील, रशिया, इंडिया, चाइना था. बाद में इसमें ज्वाइन करने वालों में से ब्राज़ील, रशिया, इंडिया, चाइना and South Africa, and then now UAE, Egypt, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, Iran, ये ज्वाइन कर गए. The next in line, and you will see the next meeting will be taking place in October in Russia. Most probably you will see Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Cambodia, Bangladesh will be the next to join BRICS. Pakistan has also applied for its membership last year, but I don't think we are pursuing in that manner. हमने ल्यूकवार्म तरीके से, मेरे ख्याल मुशाहिद हुसैन के कहने पे हमने कुछ कर दिया है. We are not serious because I don't see any seriousness in our foreign policy. या हमारे किसी लीडरशिप के से आपने कोई स्टेटमेंट नहीं देखा होगा कि ना we are pursuing our case in BRICS forcefully. वह डाल दिया एक एप्लीकेशन, क्योंकि अभी हमें IMF का प्रोग्राम लेना है. Because as I said, our entire foreign policy is now encircling into getting an IMF program. That's it. सोचिए कि we are a nuclear power, 241 million nuclear and missile power country. The entire foreign policy is now gearing towards how to get a bailout package. थोड़ा सस्ता मिल जाए, मतलब ये क्या हल्का मिल जाए या सख्त मिलेगा, उसके कंडीशन को कितना स्लो किया जा सकता है. दिस इज द एंटायर आवर एफर्ट. तो एशिया पैसिफिक रीजन, द टॉपिक इज एशिया पैसिफिक है. एशिया पैसिफिक इज ऑल्सो मूविंग टूवर्ड्स ब्रिक्स. ये सारे मुल्क एशिया पैसिफिक के हैं. मलेशिया, इंडोनेशिया, थाईलैंड, वियतनाम, कंबोडिया, बांग्लादेश, पाकिस्तान, ये सब उसी के हैं. इसमें अफ्रीका भी आ जाएंगे. आई थिंक इन द नेक्स्ट विल बी मोरक्को भी है लिस्ट में, सेनेगल भी है, अल्जीरिया भी है, वेनेजुला भी आएगा फ्रॉम लैटिन अमेरिकन कंट्रीज. तो ये दिस इज द देयर आर 59 कंट्रीज हु हैव अप्लाइड. हम भी उसमें हैं 59 कंट्रीज में. इमेजिन व्हाट विल बी द टुडे as if you look at the size of the GDP of these two grouping, आपको मैं थोड़ा सा स्टैटिस्टिक्स दे दूं. The GDP of BRICS combined is $30 trillion. BRICS expansion, BRICS 10 की बात कर रहा हूं मैं, which accounts for roughly 29 to 30% of the world GDP. जबकि G7 countries हैं 46 trillion की GDP है, and roughly they account for 43% of world GDP. But in terms of purchasing power parity, BRICS has already surpassed the GDP, size of the GDP of G7 countries in 2020. अब तो ये गैप और भी वाइडन हो गया है, और भी ये गैप वाइडन हो गया है. So imagine करें कि it is not only the size of the GDP which is increasing. The BRICS 10 currently, they account for 45% of world population, 30% of world GDP, 38% of world industrial production, and most importantly, 47% of global oil production. Over 50% of world natural gas reserves are with these countries. तो जिसके पास एनर्जी हो, दुनिया आजकल दुनिया की इकोनॉमी उसी की कंट्रोल में होगी. Imagine when Venezuela also joins, Indonesia joins, they are also oil-rich countries. This number will further expand. तो किसी को अभी आपने अगर तंग करना हो तो आप एनर्जी पे पाबंदी लगा दें, आप नहीं बेचेंगे उसको. जिस तरीके से 1973 में after the Arab-Israeli war, the Arab world imposed sanctions. We will not be selling oil to all those countries who are supporting Israel. दुनिया में तबाही मच गई थी. So now BRICS has that instruments with them to create problems for the rest of the world and particularly for the G7 countries. So these are the development which is taking place. ये क्यों हो रहा है? Why these smaller countries, particularly country like Pakistan and other global south are joining BRICS? इसके मेरे नज़दीक 6-7 इसके reasons हैं. The first, threat or use of economic sanction. हर वक्त डरे रहते हैं कि हम पे कोई sanction न लग जाए. Second, threat or use of dollar as a weapon. Dissatisfaction from the institution of global governance, IMF, World Bank, उस हमसे ज़्यादा कौन जानता है उनको. इसकी वजह से we are looking towards alternative sources of financing. AIIB बन गया, न्यू डेवलपमेंट बैंक बन गया, and so on. So there are new avenues are also coming up. Dissatisfaction from the current global order. There is an unwritten law that the president of the World Bank will always and always be a US citizen, and the managing director of the IMF will always and always be a European. Why? कहीं पे ये लिखा हुआ है. The best man should get the job. ये जो alternative जो emerge हो रहे हैं economic power, they are basically eluding this, that we need an improvement in the global governance and particularly the institution of global governance. तो अब आप सोचें कि जब सब लोगों के हाथ से चीज़ें निकलने लगेंगे तो उसके अंदर अग्रेसिव जो एटीट्यूड है वो बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ेगा, ब्रूटल हो जाएंगे वो लोग भी. Just to protect their own supremacy, they will go to any extent. And this is quite obvious in Gaza war, the height of the brutality we have seen or watching every day. Nervousness among the global south countries over the brutal use of hard power and coercion by the West. ये भी उनको डरा डरा के उसकी तरफ लेके जा रहा है. An absence of soft power to win the hearts and minds of the global south countries. ये अमेरिका के पॉलिसी में सॉफ्ट पावर का कंसेप्ट खत्म हो गया है. कोएर्सिव पावर है, लोग डरते हैं, डर के हैं. पहले डरते थे तो उसी के साथ लगे रहते थे. अब नाउ दे आर सीइंग दैट देयर इज एन अल्टरनेटिव आल्सो इमर्जिंग, तो लोग उसके तरफ देख रहे हैं. जब उसके तरफ देख रहे हैं, वो उसकी तादाद बढ़ रही है, तो दूसरी तरफ से एग्रेसिवनेस एंड ब्रूटैलिटी और ज़्यादा होता जा रहा है. एंड दिस हैज़ अननर्व्ड द कंट्रीज ऑफ ग्लोबल साउथ. हम अभी भी इतने ज़्यादा डरे हुए हैं कि आप तसव्वुर नहीं कर सकते. इससे ज़्यादा नहीं बोलूँगा. बहुत ज़्यादा हम डरे हुए हैं. पता नहीं हम कुछ कर दिया, बड़े सरकार नाराज़ हो गए तो हम पे भी सैंक्शन लग जाएगा. सो बॉटम क्लोजिंग रिमार्क्स ये है कि द वर्ल्ड इज चेंजिंग. ये जो थर्ड ब्लॉक है अकॉर्डिंग टू द IMF, this is vanishing globally, slowly. We also belong to this non-aligned group. क्योंकि स्पेसेस ख़त्म होते जा रहे हैं, तो यही कंट्री जो आज non-aligned है, कल वो किसी एक साइड पे हो रहे हैं. Pakistan has also perhaps taken this route, and hopefully this is the right approach. We have to balance. वो जो था ना पहले बैलेंसिंग एक्ट, वो बैलेंसिंग एक्ट ख़त्म हो गया. बस आप ताल्लुकात को ठीक रखने की कोशिश करें, लेकिन ये you have to align yourself. The rest is the world is doing that. We have to do this. अगर हम ये कहते हैं कि नहीं वो नाराज़ हो जाएंगे, हमें इनसे भी अच्छे ताल्लुकात रखने हैं, उनसे भी अच्छे ताल्लुकात रखने हैं, that era is gone. We have to take a conscious decision. इसमें अब अगर रिसर्च की ज़रूरत है, we should do more research. अपने इंटरेस्ट को सामने रखते हुए we have to take a route, and I think we are moving in that direction, but we are very afraid. Although we have taken this route, but we are very afraid. तो वो अब ये जो डर है, इसको निकालना होगा. Sir, thank you very much.
Sir, would you like to say a bit about de-dollarization? ये जो सऊदी अरेबिया ने रिवोक किया है 50 years का वो जो पेट्रो डॉलर डील है, a bit about that and then we'll open the house for.
Yeah, you see, नहीं dollarization. Actually देखें ये थोड़ा सा उसको we have given a hype to this, and why we have given this very much hype to this factor, because of the tension that I have described. ये देखें हम सऊदी अरब जो है वो भी ये basically it was a joint economic commission के जो report थी 1974 की, उसमें ये था उस joint economic commission में कि the price of oil will be fixed in US dollar, and the Saudi Arabia will sell this its oil in US dollar. The settlement will take place in US dollar only. ठीक है? और जो सऊदी will earn these dollar, तो अब सऊदी अरब क्या करेगा, कहाँ रखेगा? So the Saudi will invest in US treasury. तो आप सोचें Yes, the natural resources of Saudi Arabia being sold in a currency, जो currencies हमने earn किया है, वो जिसकी currency है उसी के उसमें हम जमा कर रहे हैं जाकर. So basically, the oil has been transferred to the U.S. Treasury, the earning. तो ये सिलसिला चलता रहा और in lieu of that, the United States will provide security to the Saudi royal family and Saudi government. वो टर्म ख़त्म हो गया, 50 years का था वो. अब उसमें एक जॉइंट कमीशन के एक रिपोर्ट थी. दिस वाज नॉट एन एग्रीमेंट इन राइटिंग, जैसे हमने प्रोजेक्ट किया है इस तरीके से नहीं था. इट वाज अ पार्ट ऑफ द जॉइंट इकोनॉमिक कमीशन फॉर 50 years. वो ख़त्म हो गया है. अब उसको सऊदी ने नहीं दोबारा किया है या बाद में करेंगे, फिर देखेंगे क्या होगा. बट सऊदी अरेबिया हैज़ ऑलरेडी explained its interest in World Economic Forum. Its finance minister has said that we are open to trade our oil other than US dollar as well. Or Saudi Arab is already selling this oil in Chinese currency to China. So trade is already taking place even before the expiration of this joint commission report. इससे पहले भी वो trade other than dollar में कर रहे थे. अब बाकी मुल्क भी कर सकते हैं, UAE भी कर सकता है या कोई और भी मुल्क उसको कर सकता है.
Is it a threat to United States?
Of course. Why it will affect United States? Because the power of the United States is derived from the dollar being an international reserve currency. United States can print as much dollar as they want. हम नहीं print कर सकते रुपया as much as they want, because who will then take our rupee? Rupee is not an international reserve currency. Dollar is international currency. कहा जाता है कि जितने डॉलर अमेरिका में सर्कुलेट कर रहे हैं उससे कहीं ज़्यादा वो आउटसाइड यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स सर्कुलेट कर रहे हैं. So people are settling their account in dollar. That is why there always exists a demand for dollar. जब de-dollarization होगा, डॉलर की डिमांड कम होती जाएगी, तो they cannot print as much as they want, and it can create problems for the United States. तो ये जो अमेरिका का जो पावर है, it is backed by dollar. तो अगर अमेरिका के पावर को इरोड करना है तो डॉलर के पावर को इरोड करना होगा. And that is why the process of de-dollarization is taking place. अभी आप देखें कि India has signed agreement with about 30 countries to trade in their local currency. United Arab Emirates and India is doing their trade, in bulk of their trade in their local currency. इसी तरीके से UAE and China is trading in yuan. तो डॉलर के जो डिमांड है वो जब $1 भी अगर डिस्प्लेस हो रहा तो to that extent the de-dollarization is taking place. So I don't see that in the near future, in 5 to 10 years, dollar will remain a powerful currency, but it will not be the powerful currency. There will be some alternative way of settling their accounts. आप देखें कि स्विफ्ट के अगेंस्ट में भी नए जो हैं सेटलमेंट के चाइना का भी आ गया, सिप्स कहलाता है गालिबन, पे इंटरनेशनल समथिंग लाइक दैट. सिप्स तो उसका है, रशिया का है. तो वो जो है वो अल्टरनेटिव. देखिए, दिस इज लाइक ए वेपन्स इन वॉर. अगर आपने एक अच्छा टैंक बनाया है, कोई दूसरा मुल्क उससे पावरफुल टैंक बना लेता है. आपने एक मिसाइल आपने बनाया एनिमी को हर्ट करने के लिए, एनिमी जो है उससे बेहतर लॉन्ग रेंज की मिसाइल बना लेते हैं. तो इधर डॉलर अगर इंस्ट्रूमेंट है तो अल्टरनेटिव टू डॉलर विल कम एज ए. तो ये सारी चीज़ें इग्नाइट किसने किया? यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स.
Thank you very much, sir. We come to the end of a very interesting round of discussion, and now we would like to open the floor for.
Anil has talked on technology, but in between we can have the question answer.
Would like to
I
say
think we
something?
can begin with Sir Ali and defense statute.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arza Muhammad and Dr. Wali Janjua Sahabs. It has been a very enlightening discussion for me personally. I would just like to say a few things. First of all, is to understand what's happening in Asia Pacific. I just use a rough heuristic in terms of understanding Asia Pacific as the eastern extremity of a supercontinent that can also be called Eurasia. And if you look at the long-standing traditional geopolitics of the western extremity of the supercontinent, we would come to discover that it has traditionally involved an offshore balancer in the form of the United Kingdom, and it has contained two mainland great powers, which no longer are great powers. They basically, I call them passive great powers. They are not active great powers any longer, France and Germany. And the role of the traditional offshore balancer has been to ensure that the integration or the development of understanding between these two mainland great powers is delayed for as long as possible. So this, in a nutshell, is for me the long-standing 300 geopolitical history or evolution of the western extremity of the supercontinent of Eurasia. Something of the same sort has been contrived to happen in the eastern extremity of this supercontinent, that is Asia Pacific. We have a traditional offshore balancer, which is Japan, which has been traditionally supported by powers external to that part of the world. And for that, an artificial unity or artificial indigenousness is created in terms of thinking of United States as part of Asia Pacific as well. And we have two mainland Asian great powers. One is India and China, and the same logic is repeating itself in Asia Pacific as well. That has already been at play and is still playing out still in the western extremity of Eurasia. So I think there is hardly anything new under the sun in terms of the broad geopolitical patterns of the contemporary world, except for the fact that unlike Germany, China is much smarter, has a long appetite for waiting, and is very patient, and is not half as jingoistic as the German Junkers were. The second brief point that I want to make, and I think our expert in the global technological trends would enlighten us more about that, is that the rate of current technological diffusion and the offense-defense balance in military technologies in terms of the development and evolution of technologies like AI, robotics, biomedical science, synthetic biology, somehow tend to favor the offense aspect of military technologies. So chances are that states might become more adventurous, and this trend of technological diffusion will not aid the cause of peace in the world. And with this, I'll just finish my intervention. Dual-use technologies with this technological trend will come to assume equally high proportions of destructiveness and productiveness, which is basically a cause for greater conflict, in my estimation, in the coming years and decades. Thank you.
I think it's a very good point, the last point which you made. They now call it non-nuclear strategic weapons, which are not basically nuclear. They are more in the realm of AI and technology, but they are more devastating than the nuclear weapons, because if they target the nuclear weapons, the launch system, the targeting system, the GPS, then they could actually trigger a nuclear response. Thank you. Ma'am Nagmana is leaving. Will you like to say something before you leave, ma'am?
I just want to say thank you for really a very, very interesting discussion. I've definitely learned a lot today. And I am sorry I have to leave, but we have our forum's inauguration today, so it's a little busy. Thanks, sir. Thank you very much.
So we, next, would you like to say a few things?
Assalamu alaikum, sir. I'm Captain Navy Matar, Defense Attaché of Oman. I would like to thank you all for honoring and inviting me for this event. Also, I would like to thank all participants. Yes, throughout these discussions, I have or I had sort or lots of questions, but I think I should be more prepared next time to read about the subject. But unfortunately, I received the invitation, just yesterday. But I just want to point or give one point is because this is a very interesting subject, and I believe it is conducted frequently. So I believe, or I request in the future for the other defense attaches to be invited because it's very important, especially those people like us in the same region. We are sharing with you like history, sharing. We are only, let's say with Pakistan, we are separated, or now we can say we are connected by the sea. And we are sharing historic ties between Oman and Pakistan. We are very interested in the situation in Pakistan, especially. I believe that the position or the location of Pakistan is challenging, from all perspectives. So yes, we are interested in this, and I would like to share this with other DAs and invite them for these these events. That's all from my side. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much. I think it's a wonderful suggestion. We normally do invite the defense attaches and the embassies, but we'll make it a point that on such forums, we take your help as well. And Dean as well, Dean of the Diplomatic Corps. Thank you.
For 178 years, Gwadar was part of Oman. So that is the shared history. And we bought Gwadar in 1958 by paying only $3 million at that time. And that was paid by, mostly by Aga Khan. ये आप लोगों के knowledge के लिए.
But at the same time, we should be grateful to the monarchy because they were very kind. It was a very brotherly gesture. Now we can be partners in the economy.
The geostrategic, as Dr. Jaspal talked about and Dr. Ishfaq talked about geoeconomics. Like, I have certain thoughts on the artificial intelligence. Like, as we manifest that the upcoming years is going to be the age of AI. Now, even if you look at the defense budget allocations of even the Asia-Pacific countries or even in Pakistan, like most of the investments or most of the funding is now going towards the AI and the high computing power. But I think from the developing countries' perspective, we need to understand that why the AI is needed. Because the need for the developed countries versus the developing countries is totally different. Which direction we need to move. If we look at the AI policy of US, it's now focused on cybersecurity. If we look at the AI policy of India, it's not on cybersecurity, it's basically on the startups. Now in Pakistan, we are in the process of finalizing our first national AI policy, and we focus on the inclusive development. But what we have seen that if we map this AI progression between the countries, there is a lot of AI inequality that we see. And why that AI inequality? Because what US is now doing or what Europe is now doing in terms of bringing the standards, like it's not artificial intelligence, it's more of the artificial intelligence. So they are now bringing the standards, they are bringing the controls, how to manage it. I think the developing countries are far behind it. We are still in the process of bringing the AI into the mainstream processes and procedures. I'll just end up with one comment that the major challenge, may it be developing, may it be the developed world, is basically the data governance. And there are two thoughts. One is that the data has to be centralized and it has to be controlled by one institution or one authority. But the other school, which now prevails, it's basically having the layers of data, but you need to have a better integrative system. For example, otherwise, if it's all centralized, it becomes more vulnerable and it might get choked at one point of time, which leads to another point that is we move from data governance to the cyber security. So this is where all the countries are right now struggling. Technology may be an answer. Technology may be the next step where our economies are going to move forward. But I think one of the emerging threats is basically the disruption of the labor markets. We have unimaginable change in terms of the labor markets, that how your supply and demand of the labor is going to be affected. But the bigger question is that are countries having the policies or having the visions that the kind of labor disruption is going to happen, what kind of fiscal impacts is going to have. So that is the food for the thought. I think in this direction, may it be Asia Pacific, may it be South Asia, or in the North, the countries need to look into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now,
Akshay is doing PhD in Asia Pacific, so I thought that if he wants to contribute, Akshay.
Um, Much has already been said on Asia Pacific and Indo Pacific. Indeed, a region full of resources and encompassing trade routes, vital salience of communications. Um, what I'll be talking about is, or questioning to Dr. Jaspal at the end of my comment as well, that US has been aligned with regional states, including Maldives and many others. The extent of this alignment has been overshadowed in recent years with the rise of China and the growing economy of China, of course, particularly through BRI. Maldives, who also joined BRI in 2014, also borrowed $1.4 billion from Chinese banks, which is equivalent 20% of its public debt. The substantial infrastructural investments which are being made by China in the Maldives, like some $200 million, are also making it more dependent, making Maldives more dependent on China. Yet Maldives is taking decisions which are against probably the interests of United States of America. For example, driving out Indian troops from Maldives. Yet US is trying to reinforce its relations with Maldives. Role of India as a net security provider, one, being close ally to United States of America, yet been driven out from Maldives, and had been, if we see the role of United States of America with Pakistan in the past, of should I be calling it a opportunist or the state which has always been selfish in its personal alliances? Will it be able to secure Indian interest in the region? One, will India be fighting for United States of America in the region? Two, and how it is more likely for that matter? Like, isn't it something which is raising more concerns and disturbing the security, scenario of the region and making it more complex in the region?
Thank you very much for raising a question. I think that definitely you are working on a PhD dissertation and you have a more inside research in it. But we have to keep in mind that when we look about the Chinese rise, as Ishfaq Sawai rightly said, that they got a time. They started not with the, this is the, it's a very interesting in historical domain. Two interesting things are emerging. A state has footprints in 152 countries plus without firing a single bullet. This is a new tradition. And infrastructure, when we look about BRI, it is connecting. So normally, traditional imperialism was geographical connectivity, but fighting and using the military power. And here, there is the same kind of corridor connectivity without firing a bullet. This is the first thing which we find it. Second is, when we look about this string of pearls, though Chinese don't like it, and when we use this term, Malacca Dalima, which was the president whose coined terms, Chinese feel agitated now because arrogancy is still now emerging in the Chinese as well. And in Pakistan, their arrogancy has been multiplied by our leadership or our people as well. We have to be very realistic. As when we were bandwagoning the Americans, we had multiplied. We are basically living in a subjective culture. And our institutions, our training, it will take maybe more time to come out of this because cultures take a generations. It's not a fault of my country. But anyway, that is BRI or SEEP or string of pearls. It's a very much networking and encircling. Indians came up with the two important or three. Necklace of diamond. It's a functional, but not as much. Second, they came up with this North-South corridor. And interestingly, who talked about it? Hillary Clinton in Chennai, April 2010, she made a speech. New Silk Route from Mumbai to Chabahar to Zaidan, Kandahar, Hajikag up to Central Asia. But it failed. Now they talk about, I think, India, Middle East, that route. Now, in the other side, now Chinese are coming in that route. Now, coming back towards your Maldives, Nepal, these areas, Chinese have a great impact now. And these countries are not a military vessels. Pakistan, India, they can be a military vessel, but they are not a military. They are economic, small. They look about their prosperity, and China is their neighbor. Yeah, they're getting more. Now, interestingly, the idea where we have to focus more, which the Pakistanis analysts are focusing, but let it needs more. We have to study the American, you can say, mindset. Americans had a isolationist, and from 1945, internationalist. And as an internationalist, their alliances are with those countries which were dependent on the United States for their regional survival, whether it's a NATO countries, Western Europe, whether it's a Pakistan. And they had a leverage, military leverage. We became a nuclear weapon state, and first time we realized that we can manage it without America, it was when there was a Salala tragedy and more after 2019. But our leadership, because it's a 60 plus mindset age-wise, realizing them it's difficult. They are still in that hangover of the bandwagoning. Now, on the other side, when they went to the India, they started treating India as a local Leviathan since 1990. Malabar naval exercise was signed in 92 and 94 operationalized. And then Japan, and they were visiting, and then, so that is a starting point. But interestingly, where the Americans have started facing a trouble, India is the first their ally which is not dependent on Americans' goodwill for its survival. India has a military capability to maintain its strategic autonomy, and they are living with that. It's another thing that when you look about the Indian leadership mindset, Hindutva, ultra-nationalists, because they need an enemy, and in that context, they wanted to move ahead, and they went for this Gulwan to show the China posture, military posture, as we were asked by to the Ayub, where is your Western posture? When he said that Quetta and Peshawar, we don't have a threat. And then he wrote this book, Friends or Masters. So Indians are now facing that challenge. Because Americans is a big power, they wanted to drag the Indians, and now Indians wanted to maintain their strategic autonomy. It's a big challenge for the Americans because India is not relying on the US for its military survival. It has the Russians, and it has a threat from whom? China. China is not interested for a war. Pakistan, India is a big power. We can deter them. And we are deterring. This is another thing that why Indians are today investing too much. On 27th February, post-Pulwama military standoff, what my understanding is, after 5 decades, military insecurity or inferiority complex was shattered in Pakistan, and India's military superiority complex shattered. How I define it, elaborate it. Nuclear rhetoric is always used by a military power which feel uncomfortable or insecure because of its conventional defense. We used to do the nuclear rhetoric from the very beginning, like 2002. These are not for showing, like our Senate leader of the House said it. Same rhetoric I heard after 27th Indian Prime Minister, not for Diwali. So that is a reflection that you lost your confidence in conventional capability and now you are relying on the nuclear. So that is the thing which you have to keep in mind. My final point is this. India has shown, Galwan was the same thing. India has shown that they are working on the integrated theatrical command, especially in the northern side. They have a China military posture. The way the Indians were beaten, because they were not expecting Chinese this kind of a reaction, after that they lowered down. So I'm not expecting India would be there, what you call it, a knight in this region. It will be just like connectivity, alliances politics, not. Unlike us, Americans are trained, or you can say traditionally or culturally, in this region, they have been influenced by our characteristics. We were available at the U2 incident, available for the Soviets, because of our own vulnerability. It's not because of the Americans. Basically, we wanted to keep a buffer. The Russians shall be away. So that was our dependency to maintain this buffer, and it was in the advantage of the Americans. People say we are satellites. No, it was our own choices. We were available for the war on terror because it was hitting us. So it was what you call it, a natural complexity for us, and it was you can say, availability to the US. Such a complexity, India don't have it. And Americans will be going to face, and that's why recently I came up, India tested Agni 5. It is going to test Agni 6, which is intercontinental ballistic missile, going for Syria. Theoretically speaking, any missile which has a range in a circle, any country which comes in that range, whether it's your friend or your foe, its security dilemma puzzle starts. So Agni 6, Syria, Washington comes in that. So where will be the security dilemma? So we have to also look these dynamics. Thank you.
So we can take a couple of questions because time is nearly up. 5 minutes? Okay. So quick questions from the audience. Anybody? Okay. Yeah. T-shirt guy.
Yeah, one of my questions is regarding the IMF and Pakistan's approach with that. Like Dr. Ashfaq said, Pakistan's current foreign policy can only be seen as IMF appeasing, and it's based on around getting more bailouts from the IMF. In the long term, I feel like everybody agrees that that's not conducive to Pakistan's growth, and we should be able to explore other diplomatic opportunities with countries as well, but that's hindered by the American threat or apprehension that we have. How do you think we're able to break away from this cycle of reliance on IMF? Do you think we can all, Pakistan is also able to take that hard stance of India of still going ahead with diplomatic engagements with countries that America does not approve of? How do you think that would end up for Pakistan? Do you think it would crush our economy? Do you think it would actually, or do you think we could be able to make that work as well for us?
Any other question?
You can have 2-3 questions, I think, at one time. Request please. Sir, हमने कहा आपका time बच गया.
ये भी बताइए आपने किससे पूछना है? जसपाल, okay. Any other? Yes.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर. सर मेरा सवाल सर हसन से. सर यहाँ पर एशिया पैसिफिक और जियो स्ट्रेटजी की बात हो रही है, लेकिन एशिया के दिल की बात नहीं हुई पूरे जब से हम लोग बैठे हुए हैं. स्पेसिफिकली अभी जब से तालिबान आए हुए वहाँ पर अफ़गानिस्तान की तरफ चाइना का बहुत ज़्यादा झुकाव है, और वहाँ पर पहले अगर रेलवे ट्रेन 3 ही, अभी वहाँ पर 600 किलोमीटर रेलवे ट्रेन बिछा चुके हैं, और बाकी बहुत ज़्यादा जो सी पे के आधे से ज़्यादा काम है वो अभी अफ़गानिस्तान में हो रहा है. तो इस बारे में.
Sir, ये 2 questions from you and 1 from Dr. Jaspal. और भी है?
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Sir, you discussed about India's robust diplomacy and lobbying. Sir, India got away with multiple sanctions in the past, including CAATSA sanctions when they procured S-400 from Russia. And recently they signed an agreement with Iran on Chabahar. Do you think the US will impose any sanctions on India in this regard? And do you think, another question, should Pakistan continue its appeasing policy towards Iran? Because Iran has been involved in creating insurgency in Pakistan. It's been evident from the fact that from backing of BLF, BLA, and harboring Raw's network in Chabahar with the likes of Kulbhushan Yadav. Should Pakistan continue? And Iran has over times violated Pakistan's airspace as well. So how should Pakistan see Iran, India's diplomatic relations, and the potential for Pakistan in this regard?
Sir, can we start with you? The question that he asked about IMF.
Yes, I can answer the IMF question. Sometime in 1995 or 96, there was an American journalist who interviewed Deng Xiaoping. And he said that you are considered as a father of modern China. You changed China basically through reforms. What were the major challenges that you faced in introducing your reforms? His answer was, changing the mindset of the people was the greatest challenge. Exactly answering to your question is, changing the mindset of our people, leadership, that we can survive without the IMF bailout package. Between 2004 and 2008, we were not under the IMF program, and yet we progressed. Economy grew by, on average, 6%. Our debt came down to from 100% of GDP to 52% of GDP. So we survived. There are 193 members of the IMF. Do you think that all the member countries of the IMF, they go to the IMF for bailout package? The answer is no. So it is changing the mindset. Can we survive? The answer is absolutely yes. But how can you change the mindset of the people? There are vested interest. In every quarter, mark my word, every quarter. So I don't see, we will be under the IMF program from 24 to 27, and then inshallah thereafter also. आपके बच्चे बड़े हो जाएंगे उस वक्त तक इसी IMF program में. So this is basically, the answer is yes, we can live without IMF, लेकिन mindset को कौन change करे?
Thank you. On a lighter note, if I have to purchase a properties in Europe and Dubai, I need a Anyway, coming back to my question answers, I think that what was this point was that question was raised here. No, I'm coming back. Look, in South China, disputes are because China started asserting. Chinese started asserting from 2012 onward. They realized it, 2013 they announced the BRI. They realized it when their economy started growing in the post-19 mid-80s onward. But if you see, Chinese have very systematically started asserting. First, they said that South China is our navigation right, challenged. Americans sent first time to their fighter jets. Chinese didn't, you can say, provoke them or deter them. Then later on when they sent, after 1 or 2 years, Chinese sent their sorties in the air but did not touch them, and then gradually moving ahead. There is a number of the states with the Chinese have claimed, now Chinese is asserting. So I still recall that in Shangri-La dialogue in 2009, when the Robert Gates used the word first time, India as a net security provider, and then he made some others, the Chinese defense minister said, why you are worried? We are 20 years behind. We do not permit the disturbances, but it was theoretical and now practical. Last month, Chinese make an amendment in their sea of losses or SOPs to engagement. According to this, earlier they used to just throw the water and keep the ships away of the, you can say, irritants. Now they are going to capture the ships. So this is an amendment in their SOP. That's why Marco said in Shangri-La dialogue, we have a fear. So Chinese are moving, but the confrontation is on the other side. In the beginning of this June, I think June 1st, Japan and South Korea signed it again, military agreement or negotiations. It was after 2018 that they had a military negotiations. Remaining others, they had it. And in this summer, they are going for a military exercise. South Koreans were not ready to join the Quad, but let's see in the coming days. But the South Koreans asked the Americans to provide them tactical nuclear weapons. They have been asking this since 1 decade, but now pressure is coming more. The last weeks, there was a nuclear consultant group meeting in Seoul where they again reassured. But what the Ishfaq Saab has said in his presentation, that Americans are overstretched. Americans have 200 tactical nuclear weapons, according to their reports. 100 they had already deployed in Europe. They cannot move them into the Korea or Korean Peninsula. And 100 they need for eventualities. So that is a shrink. So the question is, if the Americans are not going to give them a tactical nuclear weapons, 80% you can say South Koreans in polls said we develop our own. And South Korea is a very advanced nuclear country. It can change any time, and missiles wise as well. So this is, here comes the Chinese point. They said deployment of any missile, it will be responded. So that's why conflicts are brewing. Because what the Americans used the word when the Putin attacked Ukraine, the famous speech was in May 2022. President Biden said, Putin desired Finlandization of the Europe or NATO. He got the NATOization of the Finland. So that is the way, and now Europeans are, their economies are going down, and they are threatening. Trump is asking that 2% to 4% you have to give us. So that is my answer. Conflicts are maturing. I can still, my understanding is today, soft power has no image, hard power is the driving force. That is the world where we are. Whether you use the economics, it's also part of hard power, which as uses. Here was a point that on India, yes, S-400 missiles, when China purchased, there was sanctions. But when India purchased in 2018, American Congress passed a law without any, you can say, provision of amending that law that anyone who is purchasing a military hardware from the Russia, it will be going to be directly under sanctions. But when now 3 squadrons are there, 2 are on the way, but they are not putting the sanctions. Sanctioning India, it is further disaster for United States. And on a military hardware, why they put? Because Chinese are, Indians sell them, okay, we are purchasing this military hardware from them against the Chinese. But purchasing, this is a 400 billion or million, this purchase, then oil. Basically, Americans are not in a position, as I said in my previous answer, India has enough autonomy, unlike us. They put the sanction, IMF, we bleed. Sir, show me a very picture. Our Prime Minister is saying our budget has been made by the IMF on the direction. India is not that. We have to be. So India has a leverage. If they put the sanctions, India is even a blackmail. I can give you example. In Indo-US nuclear deal when started, Americans were reluctant. Indians, Manmohan Singh went to Moscow, he signed 2 nuclear reactors deal. The moment he returned, Indo-US nuclear deal was in a process and they got it. So Indians blackmail it. So putting sanctions on India, it's a big challenge for the Americans. I can remind you in 2002 even, in May, George Fernandez, I think defense minister was in Singapore. He made a statement something like that there is a war sort of thing. American ambassador wrote that all the ambassadors shall move their families out of Delhi and their economy shaken. So immediately they said no war, nothing. So 2002, what's up now, American and Indians interdependency? That is the point. My final point on this, Iran. I think Pakistan appeased the US, but it stopped now even to some extent, except because of our economic vulnerabilities. Pakistan is not appeasing anyone. We have a rational strategic calculation, I can put it. If we were appeasing, then why there were 7 strikes in the Iran? If we are appeasing, why there are strikes there? If we are appeasing India, why there was strike on 27th? I think it was a strategic, rational calculation, keeping in mind Pakistan's geography. It's a very, recently with the Chinese, this minister who was here last Thursday when I had a meeting, he was talking a lot about security. I simply remind him that we have a common geographical vulnerability. China's entire geography is like us. That's why it's a defensive strategic culture. Our have also offensive, defensive strategic culture. Geography is dictating. There only Central Asia is rooted today better. Maybe tomorrow Russians disturb, not disturb. And when they say security, we can handle internal threats. TTP is not internal, it's transnational. We need a transnational approach. We need the Chinese or other stakeholders to take into account that Al Qaeda is rising in India, Afghanistan, ISF Daesh is in Afghanistan. If they are shaking hand with the Taliban, they have to ask them. So our leader need to tell them this thing very clearly, that the Chinese who are hit here in Pakistan, not by you and me, they are hit by the others. So why not they trace? Why they only put a blame? Because my leadership say Himalaya is bigger and higher. No, national interest, convergence is the interest. So Pakistan is not appeasing Iran. If you are appeasing, then Iranian foreign minister or Iranian president was not here. So we are very clear, and I think it's a rational way of keeping calculation, not trapped in a process that a one terrorist incident can lead to a First World War, killing of Austro-Hungarian empires, you can say crown prince in Serbia, or one terrorist strike which Indians thinks like Pulwama lead a two nuclear armed state to a air combat. I think we shall avoid it and rational.
इंडिया का नहीं इंडिया ईरान नहीं, वाई इंडिया इज गेटिंग अवे। अभी आपने देखा कि 3-4 दिन पहले 2 इंडियन स्पाई को ऑस्ट्रेलिया से आराम से निकाल दिया गया। वो वहाँ पर जो सिख कम्युनिटी एक्टिव है, वहाँ भी कोई किलिंग विलिंग के लिए पहुँचे होंगे, एक्सपोज हो गए, पकड़े गए, तो बजाय इसके कि उसको सज़ा दी जाए, खामोशी से उसको निकाल दिया गया। क्यों? बिकॉज ऑफ इंडियन क्लाउड। जब अमेरिका डिस्टर्ब नहीं करना चाहता है रिलेशन को, तो हाउ कैन इंडिया ऑस्ट्रेलिया डिस्ट्रॉय इट्स रिलेशन विद इंडिया? तो इंडिया का क्लाउड है बिकॉज ऑफ इट्स बिगर कंट्री, मैसिव मार्केट, हर शख्स को इंटरेस्ट है इंडिया से। ओ बिल्कुल बिल्कुल बिल्कुल, कोई शक नहीं है।
Let me add, sir, here. It will get away, but not completely. The person which United States demanded, if you see the reports, 2 or 3 days back, he was killed in Delhi by shooters. It was basically raw zone shooting. That was basically a raw person, their own very decorated sort of person. He was killed in Delhi, showing somebody else killed. So India is not a free, as much not freedom, the way we think.
Thank you so much. I think there is a lot of knowledge which we gained today. There's a lot of new knowledge that we have gained today. I will not repeat what has already been said. There are 3, 4 points which I would like to draw attention to. When we were talking of the Indo-Pacific strategy, and similarly when we talk of the IOR and IPEF and other things, Pakistan, despite being an Indian Ocean rim country and having a large coast, thousands of kilometers coast, is conspicuously amiss in all the arrangements, all the strategic or also economic arrangements under the US auspices, which indicates a bias. So this is one thing which we need to highlight again and again. It's a region which has 50% population of the world, and the projections are that 2/3 of the world growth in next few years will be from this region. There is some realization, I think, in the United States, as it has been alluded to by you people, sir and Jaspal, that too much of confrontation between China and United States is not good. And secondly, if they push China and Russia to wall together, they may collude. And if they collude, and as Dr. Jaspal indicated, the North Korea, then it is going to become a very big, actually, bite to swallow by the United States. So they will have to be careful and perhaps be a bit realistic and stand down on certain things like decoupling. They will have to reconsider, because decoupling of the economy is not going to hurt China only. It is going to hurt the United States. It is going to hurt certain other countries also. Technological denial, part of the Cold War. We don't have this topic of Cold War to discuss today, so I'll not go into the detail. However, technologically, denial is actually helping Chinese, the way the sanctions have helped us and certain other countries. When it comes to China and United States, they have very different strategic thinking. China is a civilization state, as it has been alluded to by Ambassador Nagwan also. They think differently, they approach things differently, they approach international relations differently. And they are not looking forward to any confrontation for next maybe 50 years perhaps. And they are not looking to become a superpower in next 50 years perhaps. They are just progressing well on certain lines and now gradually asserting well, as it has been said. 155 countries, उनके साथ उनका Belt and Road Initiative जो है, they have actually spread like an octopus, and octopus in positive terms, as the mariners say, that octopus is the Mother Teresa of seas, because it eats lot many animals and it helps them survive under the sea. So it is in that sense. But they have approached it very differently after the fall of the Soviet Union and 9/11, when United States was busy fighting wars, spending trillions, killing millions. Very quietly, China made the inroads on the basis, on the vehicle of economy. Net security provider pe baat ho gayi. I think you very aptly said, sir, they will never fight for anyone, and they will never fight for the United States against anyone. बड़ी interesting बात हुई सर कि economy जो है, this is a new means of war, and there is no doubt in this. And economy and geoeconomy, geostrategy have been intertwined since ages. Sir, thank you so much. We enjoyed, we learnt a lot. We are grateful that you gave so much of time. We are grateful to you for a very exhaustive session, and especially the very candid question answer session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ali Sahib, आपके लिए अक्सर के लिए, for your inputs, and all those who asked questions and gave their inputs from IPRI as well. Very grateful to you, sir. I think we'll present souvenirs and have a group photo outside the office. Please. Thank you so much.